We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, we make a brighter day, just you and me. All right, hello there, thrill seekers. Here's what I'm looking at as I do this video. You see him over there? He's watching me do this video. But what you heard there was a snippet of the song We Are the World. And the reason you heard a snippet of the song We Are the World is because the other day I watched a documentary called The Greatest Night in Pop. I believe that's the title, something like that. And it was either Netflix or Hulu or one of those. But it was on the making of the song We Are the World. Now, I think a certain portion of my audience is young whippersnappers, so I'll give you a little potted history of We Are the World, which is that it was a charity song put together by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie in 1985, where they got together everybody who was a big name in the music business and Dan Aykroyd for some reason. I don't know why. And they all got together and sang this song, which you heard a little bit of. And the proceeds were supposed to go to help alleviate a famine that was going on in Ethiopia, in Africa. And I think maybe my perspective on We Are the World was a little different from most people's perspective on, most Americans' perspective on We Are the World. Because in 1985, I was 10 years away from having lived in Africa. So we did not live in Ethiopia. We lived in Kenya, which is south of Ethiopia. But we had visited Ethiopia. And so I had some idea of what Ethiopia was like. And I think a lot of Americans, when they hear Africa, they just imagine mud huts and people eating bugs and lizards and stuff like that. But actually, when we visited Ethiopia, we went to Addis Ababa, which is a big city, a fairly modern city. It was, I remember thinking it was kind of shabbier than Nairobi. Thinking, oh, this is kind of like a few steps down from Nairobi in terms of amenities and just organization and everything. But I had a very limited understanding of what was going on there. But I had a different understanding of what Africa was from probably what most people did. And I also had a very cynical attitude, which I still have to this day, towards things like We Are the World, where a bunch of people get together who are rich celebrities and they pat themselves on the back for how wonderful they are to be doing this great charitable thing for the poor Africans and all this. But, I don't know, it's probably fine to support things like that, and it's fine to do good works, as the Christians say. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but when I look at it, I just see a bunch of self-congratulatory fat cat celebrities going, look how great I am, and look how wonderful I am for doing this wonderful thing, and wonderful me. Hey, look, I'm Bruce Springsteen, I'm wonderful. Look at me, I'm Lionel Richie, I'm wonderful. Look at me, I'm Michael Jackson, I'm the most wonderful of all. All this stuff. So you get a lot of that junk. But the other aspect of We Are the World that I don't think a lot of people picked up on is where that phrase came from. And it comes from Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. If you don't know who Krishnamurti was, I'll give you the shortest version I can come up with, which is that he was a guy who was found as a child by members of the Theosophical Society. And the Theosophical Society is this group that came together around a woman named Madame Blavatsky, who was a Russian lady who was very interested in studying Hinduism and Buddhism. And not too many Westerners had studied Hinduism and Buddhism. So for whatever else you want to say about the Theosophical Society, because they're very controversial, they did play a very big role in introducing Westerners to some of these concepts like karma and reincarnation and the very basic outline of who the Buddha was and what Hinduism actually believes and so forth and so on. So they were very good in that sense, in that they brought these ideas to the West that hadn't been introduced before. They got some of them wrong, and they did some other things, and they were very into the occult, and they were very into kind of making everything really mystical and whatever. But they did bring those ideas across. They found Krishnamurti as a child and decided that Krishnamurti was Maitreya, and Maitreya is the reincarnation. Well, I don't know if you'd reincarnate. He's like the next Buddha. Apparently, allegedly, the Buddha, when he was alive, said that a long, long time from now, there will be another Buddha, and he will be named Maitreya. And a lot of people have come along claiming to be Maitreya. Most famous one in Buddhism is Nichiren, if you know the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo people who run around chanting that and saying they're Buddhists, and they don't usually define themselves as Nichiren Buddhists. They're just Buddhists, and a lot of people don't get that they're actually a kind of a subsect of Buddhism. Anyway, Nichiren claimed to be Maitreya around the time of Dogen, so 800 years ago. I doubt any of them are Maitreya, because Maitreya is supposed to come along in a few million years or some crazy amount of time like that. So to claim to be Maitreya in the 20th or 21st century is a little bit premature. Anyhow, Krishnamurti split with the Theosophical Society and said, I'm not Maitreya, I'm just Jiddu Krishnamurti, and he went around talking about very deep, very interesting things, and I was a big fan of Jiddu Krishnamurti back in the early 80s, because I'd come across his books in used bookstores, and one of them that I liked very much was called You Are the World. And it was originally published in 1972. I just looked that up. But I obviously didn't read it in 1972. I read it much later. But I did read it before 1985, before We Are the World came out. And so I remember when We Are the World came out, among other things, I was thinking, oh, they stole that line from Krishnamurti. And checking the internet this morning, I couldn't find any references to anybody associated with We Are the World acknowledging that they got the line from Krishnamurti. I don't know, maybe it's somewhere if I dug deep enough, but I couldn't find anything. So I think that's interesting that they so blatantly took this idea from Krishnamurti and then never mentioned where it came from. Maybe that's how people work in that field, because if they'd mentioned it came from Krishnamurti, then people might think it's culty or something. I don't know what people think, but anyway. So this idea of you are the world, we are the world, is Krishnamurti phrased it as you are the world. It's also a similar idea that comes up in Buddhism, and it's one of the most difficult ideas. It's something I have brought up in my books and my videos and things, and people kind of don't understand it. I don't know if there's a way to explain it, and I'll tell you why. When I was trying to prepare for this video, I looked up Krishnamurti You Are the World on YouTube, and I came up with a video in which Krishnamurti answers the following question. So here's the question. How can the idea you are the world and you are totally responsible for the whole of mankind be justified on a rational, objective, sane basis? That's a question that Krishnamurti got from his audience. And the first thing he does when he answers the question is he says, I'm not sure it can be rationalized in a sane way. And then he kind of goes on to talk about it. Now, there's a level of, there's different levels of understanding this idea. And the one level is the most superficial one, and this is the one that Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie et al., all the celebrities in We Are the World, were going for, which is that we're all human beings. Every human being is a human being, and we all have loves and likes and pains and itches, and we can all relate to each other, and we we don't need to think about what nationality we are, what race we are, what gender and sex we are, and all this other stuff. We can come together and understand each other's humanity and help each other out, and yay, hugs and beautiful things. And that's good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But there is a deeper level to this, which one comes to understand through a meditation practice, if you kind of go into it long enough. And I'm gonna see if I can explain that to you, at least from my perspective. So I understood this, and I'd read Krishnamurti's books, and I'd read some Buddhist books, and I understood this idea of the oneness of all mankind, all humankind. And so I got it on that superficial level, and it wasn't that hard. It's not that hard to get that superficial level of it, to get the very basic level of it. But the Buddhists, and even people like Krishnamurti to a certain extent, are talking about it on an even deeper level. And this is why I can understand why Krishnamurti starts off his answer by saying, I don't know if it can be rationalized. Because it's a kind of idea, or it's a kind of understanding that, for me, to understand it myself in a kind of deeper way, took 15 or more years of daily Zazen practice and loads of retreats and loads of weird things happening to my brain and so forth and so on that happen as you study a meditation, as you do a meditation practice. But there came a time when it sort of opened up and I got it. And the understanding was, it's not just that, what I was just saying a minute ago, that we're all human beings with loves and likes and itches and scratches and, all this other stuff. It is that there is one single human consciousness operating here in the world. This is, as Krishnamurti said in his own answer, this is maybe impossible to explain rationally. It's something that you just get. And enough people have gotten it that I think we can go ahead and say this is objectively true. I'm hesitant to even use words like that. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, as the kids say. That there is one human consciousness operating in this world. That we normally think that there are, 8 billion individual human consciousnesses operating in the world. And each one is a separate thing, completely cut off from all the rest of the other human consciousnesses operating in this world. And that, we can come together, but fundamentally we're all different. We're all just individuals. That is one side of what life is. There is one side in which we are each individuals forever separate from each other. But there's a deeper way of looking at it, which is very difficult to get. And it doesn't seem to... It's not on the level of intellectual or rational understanding. It's on the level of a kind of experiential understanding, that there is no difference between self and other. That these folks you see out here, outside of you, are a kind of projection of the very same thing that projects you. Golly, this is weird. Now, my friend Shozan Jack Haubner, who runs a YouTube channel called Zen Confidential. I'm trying to dig out my phone. So Shozan Jack Haubner, in his most recent video, says he was talking to somebody who couldn't get this idea. He phrased it differently from "you are the world." I think he was talking about it in the sense of no self. No self. One of the ways to understand no self is that the self that is you is the same self that is everybody else. So individual self is kind of an illusion. And let me read you what Shozan Jack Haubner said as I took it from the transcript that YouTube gives you. Yes, I know I'm here. Yes, I know the circumstance is such that we have to sort of engage with each other as separate nodes, but that's not really real. It's not real in a way wherein you are fundamentally trapped inside your separate yourself, separate from the world around you. The borders are porous. The place where you end and the world or the other begins is not fixed. That border or that boundary is arbitrary. It's illusory. It's created by our human senses. And he says, I think Kant talked about this sort of pre-existing categories within the human mind that take whatever this is out there and translate it certain ways to have boundaries and colors and forms and shapes. But whatever this is doesn't fundamentally have those things, those boundaries and shapes and forms. It's the human person nervous system mind engaging with the world, giving rise to one's self and one's surrounding, and vice versa. So these things are not fundamental. And that's a good way of putting it, so that's why I read his version of it instead of trying to come up with my own. But I've talked about this before, and what are you going to do about that? I think becomes the fundamental question once you see this, and it's a question I've been struggling with ever since I first came across it. First as an intellectual concept, and next as something that I've seen and cannot unsee, something that I can no longer deny the reality of. What do I do about that? And probably the thing you can do about that relates to the previous video I did on, I guess it was Tuesday, where I was talking about Sung San's philosophy of don't know, just go straight. It's the just go straight thing. It's follow your intuition and accept what it brings to you without trying to force yourself upon the situation. This is one of the first things that came up for me after I understood this. Because I understood this, it comes to one in a flash. And in my case, it came to me in a flash just before I arrived at work one day at Tsuburaya Productions. And one of the first things I had to do was answer emails, because it was my job in those days to just, at that point, we had one computer per office, not individual office, but per department, let's say. Because the departments were all in one office. It's not like in America where each person has their own office or even their own cubicle. Everybody works in the same room if you're in one department. So each department had one computer that could access the internet. They got more as time went on, but at that point they only had one. And since the emails that we had to deal with were in English, it was part of my job to gather them all, figure out who needed to see what, and respond to the ones that were in my domain to respond to. So I remember I had one, I don't remember what the email was, but one had popped up that I had to respond to. And I saw that prior to this day, I had always put myself into these responses. Meaning I'd always put my own wants and my own needs or my own personality even into these things and had something that I wanted to gain for this, even in something as simple as responding to an email. And I saw that, I don't need to do that. In fact, doing that gets in the way. it gets in the way in the very simple getting in the way aspect of it gets in the way of doing business. And even though I was enough of a business professional that I wasn't, constantly putting myself into every business email or response, I could do better than that. I could take myself out of it entirely. So I just started doing that. And I think that's the best way to live life. And it's not easy because the impetus or the desire to force yourself into a situation is very strong. And it's probably one of the reasons that Buddhism so strongly emphasizes this no self aspect. It's something we have to keep reminding ourselves of, even people who have seen beyond the individual self. So even the Buddha had to remind himself of that. So just kind of keep yourself out of the interaction, which is, I don't know. It's easier said than done. It's yeah. Let's leave it at that. Easier said than done. So there you go. I don't know if that video amounted to anything, but those are my reflections on We Are the World. And I know that got very weird, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. If you want to contribute to me reflecting on things like this, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and my Patreon accounts. Those are my main ways of making a living, usually my only way of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. Okay, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy, what do you think? Are you the world? Is there one doggy consciousness operating in this whole world? One dog? Maybe dogs understand that better than we do. I don't know, but you look like you don't want to listen to me talk. You just want to go to sleep. All right, we'll see you later, Ziggy. Bye.